Like one of the challenges that as my particular core type is like, learning that my voice, it's meaningful and it matters. And so I think there's a quick narrative to say like, it doesn't really matter kind of what I think. And if I don't catch myself, like, why am I, that's not true. Why am I thinking that? Then it will kind of take the reins and have me pull back.
Welcome to this session of the Forever Changed podcast. Lisa and I are delighted to welcome Jeremy Dawsey-Richardson as our guest today. We find him in sunny San Diego, California, USA. Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to hear your story, but just to get to know you better. And we already know you better based on the flexibility that you have already offered us in getting ready for today's podcast. So, Jeremy, before we dive into the particular story that you've so generously offered to share today, just tell us a little bit about yourself. A little bit about your background, certainly your current role, but uh, help us get to know Jeremy.
Yeah. So you mentioned I'm based in San Diego. I'll start with some family first. Been married to my wife Kim for almost 24 years.
Woohoo.
We met in high school and did not date in high school, but met there. And we have three amazing kids. Elliot, who's our oldest, and then and it's the second year at UC Santa Cruz here in California. And then my middle Amos is a senior in high school, and my youngest Avila is in seventh grade. Um, and a little bit about my background. I've had a fairly meandering career in a number of different spaces, but I think the thread of all of those is my interest in what does good leading look like, um, and my bulk of my experience has been in the nonprofit space, so very mission oriented, value centered work. Um, and transitioned into leadership, actually my own coaching practice after my last internal role, which that really was the pathway through which I met Linda, through joining forces with FMG Leading, where we did leadership consulting and coaching together, and worked on the coaching practice with FMG Leading, to now my current role is with a national healthcare provider in leadership development. And so I get to spend a lot of my time thinking about how do we cultivate uh, leaders that have the necessary skills to take our organization into the future, and what gaps are we seeing, and then how do we address some of those gaps and really build quality leaders within our organization. So that's how I spend my time these days. I don't get to coach as much; it's a little more informal. So I do miss some of the coaching work that I've done in the past, but I really enjoyed the work I've got been able to do with them. I've been with this organization for about a little over 6 months.
Can't believe it's been 6 months already.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about, just kind of the leadership work that you're doing now. What are you seeing as the biggest, kind of opportunities for
Mhm.
leaders in such a dynamic, shall we say, space of healthcare in the US anyway?
Yeah. I think more than ever, like the leader's ability to navigate what I see as constant change, and so navigate fighting first for themselves, and then how do they then lead others? Um, and I think you're also seeing this a really broad um, generational representation in our organizations. And so you still have boomers who are in the workforce, and then you've got Gen Z, and there's a lot of different needs that leaders are trying to meet. Some of that is based on generational preferences, and so there's just a lot of adaptability that is needed in leadership, and a growing need for leaders to show up with uh, just increasing vulnerability and honesty, while still kind of being sort of purveyors of hope in times where I think it can be difficult to find some of that. And so those are some of the things that I'm seeing from a leadership standpoint, and what both individuals and I would say the organization needs from leaders, is to be able to bring people along vulnerably and honestly, and also still continue to lead the way and go first, and do so bravely, and also be able to name what they don't they don't know, which these days feels like more and more kind of navigating
Mhm.
spaces where there's I don't know, the days of I think, long term, you know, planning, not that we don't think are oriented really long term, but how quickly things change sort of renders a lot of clear long term planning not meaningless, but it just changes so much along the way. So that's some of what I'm seeing.
Thanks for that, Jeremy. I mean, on one hand, it kind of sounds a bit hopeless for leaders. Like in this current climate, like there's so much to do, there's so much required of them, there's so much complexity, there's so much
Mhm.
uncertainty. What is it that you uniquely bring to help those leaders in this time of like massive amounts of uncertainty? And it's not like it's going to get better by the time we get to Christmas. It's just that's the environment we live and work in now. So what do you bring to that?
Yeah, so I mean, it is not hopeless, which is good. I think at time and moments it can feel a little bit that way, but I still have a deep and fundamental belief that uh, people are willing to work hard and tackle really big challenges if they uh, have a very clear and shared sense of purpose about why they're doing the thing that they're doing or why certain decisions have been made, and then giving them a clear here's where we're driving toward, and when you I think build uh, like human connection between people. um there's almost nothing that can't be achieved, I think, by people when they pull together and really work toward uh, again a common purpose. And so I think part of what creates some of that hope is building those connection, and that is really there's additional challenges today in a more virtual environment to be able to build those connections, but it's not impossible. So continuing to invest in the humanness of the workforce is really important.
I love that. You used a phrase earlier, purveyors of hope. I feel like,
Mhm.
and that's both a responsibility and a challenge, right? For today's leaders in the way that you're seeing it, certainly in your organization. We would love to hear from you. One of, one of your forever changed moments, but give us the context, the setting, where were you? What led up to it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating thing to think through. And for me, I'll just say I was drawn to like, what are those moments that in the moment you really don't know that it will have the impact that it
Mm.
ultimately does. So I kind of was thinking through because there's plenty of significant big life moments that I could have called upon, but this one that I thought through. Uh, Really in the moment just was felt like kind of a not a nothing moment, but it just didn't couldn't have known at the time that it would really set in motion, I think, ultimately getting to my work as a coach, my work at FFG, meeting you, Linda. So the context is I had my wife is a reverend, and she had a sabbatical the previous year, and I had actually been ready for a career change, and so I timed my resignation from my the role at the time so that as a family we could go on a sabbatical together. So we traveled together uh, for a couple of months, and then came home. And Kim did some additional kind of retreating and travel. But by that point, I had been out of work for maybe 3 months and was coming back. Say, okay, I've got to find something, and it was a challenging time to land work, and so was getting to a point of not of desperation, but like I need to find something. And so through a connection, uh, a friend of mine connected me to this opportunity at a local nonprofit that was, a direct service nonprofit helping folks get out of addiction and off the street. So it's a residential recovery facility, and I'd been in role there about 6 months, and even with that, maybe at that point 7 or 8 months. And at that time, I had recently, maybe through 4 months prior, gotten a promotion. But I think both because there was, the performance was what it needed to be, but also there's an opportunity through a departure. And so I had been recently promoted, and I'm in this meeting with our new CEO. So I'd been in the promoted role maybe 3 or 4 months, and the new CEO kind of gathered all the directors together There's like 12 or 13 of us, and proceeded to ask the group this question as he was trying to learn about uh, the nonprofit and what he was seeing. And so, and really it was posed as almost a binary question to the whole group. Do we operate more like a sort of corporate business, or uh, this kind of faith oriented nonprofit? And so people were going around the room answering this question saying, oh, more like the faith based nonprofit, more like business. And as I heard people answering these binaries, I thought, that's not what I've seen. It wasn't a rosy picture to me at that point already. I was considering, okay, how long do I need to stay before I can make a departure here? So when it got to me, I said, look, I know I'm the newest person in the room, but what I have seen is, I said, I think right now in the life of this organization, we are embodying the worst of both of those worlds, which is this impersonal, sort of detached corporate culture, alongside of this really high needs, low resource, like scarcity mindset that nonprofits often have. And I said, I just see us operating at the worst ends of both of those spectrums, not as one or the other. And the conversation went, and everyone kind of went and went. And what happened from that moment? There was a vacated vice president opening, which I had zero intention of applying for, and frankly, not a lot of interest in. And within a couple of weeks of that conversation with that group, our new CEO sat me down and said, "I'd like you to consider putting your hat in the ring for this VP opening we have." And I told him all the reasons that I didn't think that I was qualified, or all these things. And he said, "Well, let the process shake that out, but I would like to invite you to apply." So after some thought and conversations with my wife and friends, I decided, okay, let's just see the process through. Um, as it turns out, they ended up offering me the opportunity. So first executive level roles about 10 years ago, and served in that role for almost 3 years. And really it set the table for my transition to building my own coaching practice, uh, and doing that for a couple of years. And through that coaching practice and the other existing relationships, I connected with FMG Leading, and did leadership consulting work for 3.5 years, and have found myself uh, in a whole new career from 12, 15 years ago. And so much of it, I think, I can trace back to that one. It wasn't just the comment, but the comment revealed something. I think that CEO, he wanted people who were going to tell him what they saw. And I didn't pull any punches, which, Linda, you know me, I don't tend to you know, I'm not, I tend to deliver things with a softer touch.
Right.
Sometimes that's not as helpful as it would be with shooting straighter. But at that moment, I just felt like I needed to say this very clear, direct sort of criticism of the organization. And it set in motion, as I look back, these like chain of events that really have me landed to where I am today.
Whoa, thanks for sharing that, Jeremy. I'm really interested in the bit before that got you to that point. There were a few times there you said, you were looking for a job and you were maybe feeling a bit, you said, I wasn't quite desperate. And then you got
Mhm.
this opportunity. I'm just curious to know how that was for you before you got into that role, and how
Mm.
you were thinking, because I think that'll be really interesting to our listeners about what your mindset was like.
We had this sort of blissful experience as a family, and coming back, having already, and I knew I'd be gone for a few months, so it wasn't really an opportunity to be kind of actively looking for work. And especially my wife and I both being in service oriented nonprofit roles, it wasn't like there was a lot of huge cushion that I was coming back to, frankly, from just a kind of financial obligation standpoint, and kind of paying our mortgage and that sort of thing. And so I really, at that point, I was looking along the lines of more sort of reconciliation, leadership oriented work, but I wasn't actually really clear, frankly, in what I was looking for. uh, and so you know by month two of looking, after having been off for 2 months, you're sort of a 4 month kind of gap from my last role to what was coming. So I had some anxiousness, and we were heading at that point into the holiday season, which anyone knows, like when you get past a certain point, like hiring is not happening until the beginning of the following year. And so for me, it was, man, I this will not be a good situation if I'm sitting here in January and have not having landed a new
Mm.
job would be really difficult on our family. And so my mindset is, hey, I need to widen the aperture of what I'm looking for and be really open to just what emerges. And I think almost in every opportunity to me that I can look back on comes back to relationships and having connection to someone. I think that's more true today almost than ever, just with the environment of applying and AI and how many resumes get submitted. But even back then, it was still based in a relationship. So a friend of mine who was a licensed therapist actually had hired someone away from the organization that I ended up landing in. Now I wasn't a licensed therapist and I wasn't required in the role, but he just reached out and said, "Hey, I just hired someone from this organization. Are you interested?" And at that point, I said, "Look, I need to be really open to whatever might come my way." And so, and think about how this fits into the plan later. And so when I got the opportunity and was ultimately offered the role, I was just in this place of, I think, a different level of kind of open-handedness. But I was, struggling. And anyone who's looked for a job can I think, resonate with the struggle of not getting callbacks or getting initial callback and then no follow-up or understanding as to maybe why you didn't move further into the process. Uh, or just straight up, are getting far and then not hearing anything. And so again, then you're just left to kind of build your own narrative. And our tendency as humans is to, when we are constructing narratives and gaps of understanding, we tend to be really negative about those narratives, whether they're for us or about us or about other people. And so it can be really difficult to get yourself out of negative self-talk when you're struggling to find work. And so that was really the mindset I think I was in when the opportunity came. And so at that point, I think my positioning or my thinking was, hey, unless there's a clear red flags here, like, I think I'm going to figure out a way to make this work. And lo and behold, it just became this great opportunity, and sort of fork in the proverbial kind of career road, and has me where I feel like I need to be and was intended to be.
Oh, thank you, Jeremy, for sharing that, because I think sharing about the struggle really makes a difference to people because, as you say, we make these narratives and it can sound like, oh, there was an overnight success. I took a sabbatical and then this job fell in my lap and my life turned around and it was amazing. And so often that is not the reality. And so it's no wonder people get despondent and disheartened out there. And I think you've really painted a beautiful picture of the reality of taking a brave step, going on a sabbatical and having that time with your family. And then, yeah, but that came at a cost and there were consequences to that. And being
Right.
in that space, I know Bruce Feiler calls it like the messy middle, that liminal space when you're betwixt and between. I think it's such a good metaphor for it. And you just painted that
Yeah.
picture beautifully. Thank you.
That. So I have two kind of two follow-up questions for now. I always have more, but two follow-up questions for now.
That's right.
One is related to that the impulse that you took advantage of and in a really beautiful way in terms of telling the truth, right? In the moment that um you said, no, this is, I have to answer this question in a particular way. And so one question is, how did you how have you carried that forward, right? How have you continued to develop that muscle?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I would I would say there's been cycles of doing that more and doing that less, and I think so much of it, for me, has been my own like journey of like self discovery and self awareness around like what are like deep patterns and having some additional language. I don't know. I would have probably some language around that previously, but over the past 10 years, just work I've done with myself and coaching and therapy and using tools like the Enneagram for increasing self awareness. Uh, Help me to have language around, okay, these are patterns that show up, and sometimes they're really helpful, and sometimes they're less so. And so, my tendency to not deliver things in a very straightforward way, understanding, hey, where might this get in my way? And where is this an invitation to understand that, hey, look, I've done this before. I can do this. I feel like in, exercising it in particular context. So I think sometimes I can, in a coaching relationship, I can show up and embody that in a more kind of targeted way because I understand that's part of what is embodied in the role. Is like you
Right.
need to be able to be a truth teller and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Um, and so I think I've part of building that muscle is being able to see when I am or I'm not doing it and be able to notice, okay, I kind of pulled a punch there or I pulled back there and what's going on that I didn't feel like I could just say what I was thinking or feeling. And frankly, if I even back up further, some of it is making sure I'm clear on what that is. And so I think
Mm.
when there's moments of that, clarity, saying, okay, I'm going to kind of capitalize on this and when the opportunity comes, say what I need to say in not a harsh way, but as direct as I can. And sometimes I can do that, and sometimes I can't. And I think you know the noticing. I think I talk a lot about this in like a coaching relationship, like starting with the noticing, like and continuing to notice and building a muscle for noticing what's happening for me when I might. Hey, what was going on that I felt like compelled and open and grounded enough to really deliver this message straight, or conversely, kind of what was going on if I was maybe meandering and being less direct in what I was saying. So I do think part of it is this ongoing journey of trying to notice when I'm doing that, uh, and just being present to the moment. I think so much of uh, you know kind of patterns show up if we're living outside of the present, which is a lot of us do, right? We can live in the past or live in the future and miss the moment that's in front of us. uh, and so trying to sort of have my feet on the ground, and I even have phrases I use like be where your feet are, like just be right here in this moment and try to just stay with the moment so that I can respond as I feel is necessary. So I mean, it is an ongoing journey. I'll say that. Um, and I think there are different spaces. I think sometimes it's harder for me, like in my personal like relationships, to be as direct. I feel like there's maybe more at stake, and so I can. So I think even just noticing how do I tend to show up in some different spaces also just continues to cultivate that awareness.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Jeremy. I'm taking that one, feeling my feet on the ground. Am I centered? Am I right here in this moment? Do you have any other things that you do on a daily basis? Because I'm thinking you started off talking about just how relentlessly busy and fast paced and uncertain the future is. And here we are talking about being present in the moment. What else works for you day to day? I see you smiling there as well, so it's obviously resonating with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think this actually I go through like different seasons. So it's not all
Mm,
present at once. So like I think there have been seasons where I've had a very focused kind of mindfulness practice at the outset of the day, uh, and usually that there's like breath work involved and just kind of meditation and grounding to start the day. I'm not in that season currently, but that was like I would think maybe the season before the one I'm in now. Uh, and I'm in a season where I'm trying to find some of that groundedness or that mindfulness in the midst of some kind of the daily activities that we need to do. So the one that comes to mind, and for anyone who knows me, they probably heard me talk about this more recently, is like, so I do all of our cooking for our family, or most of our cooking. But what I also do is make coffee every morning. But I don't, it's not a drip machine that you just kind of push a button and go. it's a Chemex and it's a pour over. So it's about a 15-ish minute process, sometimes even closer to 20, depending. Uh, and, I have tried to just not do anything else, not look at my phone, not like check the calendar for the day or be in emails but just participate in the activity of I love the smell. It's just everything from that like the tactile experience of doing it to what's happening to knowing that it's something that is a gift both to me and to my wife to just have like good coffee every morning. And so the slowness and sort of the care involved in it, all of that to me becomes a mindful like kind of grounding practice, and it's something I do every single morning. And uh, so how I approach even things like that, I think have become uh, part of my practice. Another thing that I will say that comes up to me is being out in our yard or tending to plants that we have planted, and we just recently kind of replanted our front yard. And so tending to these living things that bring us a lot of joy and beauty. And some of it, I'm like, I don't have control. Like I can try to create the best. All I can do is create the best context that I know how to create for the plants to grow. And I still am like, why did that one die, but the one next to it that's the same plant, that's got the same everything, just did not work. So there's this like this rhythm of doing what I can and then surrendering the outcome. Like so, I mean, those are the two things, and actually sort of I guess tend to book in my day because the coffee is morning, and the if I can get out in the yard, I'll do that later in the day. Uh, those are two, I think, things that I sort of need to do just because that's we drink coffee and we have made this investment in our yard, and they become a form of my own practice, both in self awareness and just kind of groundedness in the midst of a lot of kind of frenzied pace of life.
What's the story or belief that you had to let go of to step into the work that you're doing now?
Oh, um, I'll just modify it by saying the story that I'm continually letting go of,
Mm,
uh, because I wouldn't say that it is let go of.
That's very
And it's
honest.
it's a narrative that I think, and I'll use, language that was I sort of learned from the tool of the Enneagram, but like one of the challenges that as my particular core type is like learning uh, that my voice like it's meaningful and it matters. And so I think there's a quick narrative to say like it doesn't really matter kind of what I think. And so and if I don't catch myself like why am I that's not true, why am I thinking that, then it will kind of take the reins and have me pull back. And so it's catching myself when I'm in the act of sort of being myself, uh, and also then saying nope, that's not right. I have a thought here, or I have a perspective that I think could be helpful or valuable depending on the context. And so I think I go back to moments like the one that I've shared as evidence of I can say it in a way that people, I can say those direct things in ways that people are able to receive them and they really can be helpful. And so it's not about not saying it. It's about, what is mine to say, and then just choosing to trust that I'm going to say it in good faith and with the grace needed for the hearer to be able to receive whoever that is or whatever group that is. But it starts with me uh, not letting that narrative that, um, you know, kind of win the day that is what I think doesn't really matter, because that's a sort of a deep narrative that is there that I can continue to work through, but I think so that is the one that comes to mind. So I mean, that's a great question. What comes to mind is as I continue letting go of that particular narrative.
Mm. That's so helpful because I think that'll relate to a lot of people who have that very strong inner dialogue that says, yeah, don't bother with that, or that's going to upset somebody. And it certainly spoke to me about some of the narratives maybe that I have held on to, particularly thinking about childhood and expectations that you have of yourself and you around achieving and having the right answer. I think if you've been in an education system where you're rewarded for
Yeah.
results and not
Yeah.
for speaking up or dissenting or critical thought, then it can be very hard to let go of that narrative. It's definitely a work in progress for me as well.
Those deep those deep ones are there. I think those are lifelong journeys by and large.
I agree. I agree.
Jeremy, if you know you're working with a set of leaders or a leader in particular who you notice is maybe responding to or holding back based on a similar narrative, what advice do you have for them?
You know, too often, especially if it's in the context of a space or a meeting or a team, there's folks that often tend to speak first and loudest. Um, and the folks you're talking about be giving this perspective or advice to are likely folks who don't speak first and loudest. And it is those people that we most need to hear from. I think often, especially when they have something to offer or to share. And so it is, I think there's kind of inverting I wouldn't say the fear, but the hesitation, like what could be possible if you shared that versus like, what's the outcome going to be or what is the risk if I don't share the thing, or what could I miss out on if I don't share that thing that I'm holding on to versus um, the risk of sharing it. And so, really just asking that, it's anyone who's kind of holding back uh, to start to do work around getting clear on what's driving that, and then again starts with noticing, and then it's practice, and then it's all kinds of things. But I think I would just invite anyone who has that struggle is that your your voice needs to be heard, and to be willing to take the risk to share the thing. Doesn't mean it always goes exactly the way you want, uh, but it's like anything, it is a muscle we can build. And I think every space would be uh, better off for hearing from the folks that they hear less, not more from.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What are we missing, right? And you use the word, what's possible or not possible, right? What's possible for the group or for you as an individual if you are willing to give voice to your voice, so to speak.
Well, Jeremy, we finish up each podcast with a piece of wisdom that you want to share. Is there something that comes to mind for you?
Something that's something I find to be a continual challenge, and maybe it's parts of it are connected to the different pieces of the conversation we've had, which is whatever is your work to do, make sure that you do that work. So if it's I need to integrate a practice of enjoyment for myself as a leader, because I just don't have any of those overly identified with work, or some kind of mindfulness, whatever the thing is that's yours to do, uh, take the time and space to do that work, because you will be better for it, and the people around you will be better for it. I don't mean a better performer. I just think you'll show up as more of your whole self in any of the spaces that you occupy.
Well, thank you for your time today, Jeremy, and for
Uh,
bearing with us with all the hitches and dramas
Right.
at the start. It was absolutely lovely to chat to you. Thank you for
no
joining
worries.
us. Thank you.
The same. Yeah, thank you for having me and for the invitation to be part. It's great to meet you. And Linda, great to see you as always.
You too, Jeremy. Thanks so much.